I love this tunnel at this time of the year. It's covered by the beans, and we have many, many beans. Now in today's video, we shall be looking at our top tips for the month of September. Hello and welcome back to the No Dig Norfolk Gardener. September is the end of summer. We're often very lucky in that we get what we call here in the UK an Indian summer. But you can't bank on it. As we saw earlier on this year, you can't really ever rely on the weather. For my first top tip, do keep on top of your beans. They seem to grow overnight. And you want to keep them going for as long as possible. Once we get to next month, you can leave a few beans on here then that can go over. Because once they actually produce a seed pod, it signals to the plant you've done your job. We have next year's seed. And actually, all of the runner beans and French beans that you can see on this arch, they were all seed that myself and Mrs. W saved from last year's crop. While we're on the subject of seed saving, as your flowers and vegetables start to go over and they produce their seeds, then do start to save them. However, in the case of the sunflowers that have grown this year, some of these we shall leave in situ because they will help to feed the birds as we go into autumn. We love our marigolds here, and once they have spent their flowers, you can see it's really, really easy to save seed. You don't need too many of these in order that you can get enough seed to sow for next year. That applies to many of your flowers that you're growing. Self and Mrs. W, year on year, are putting in more and more annuals into the veg plot to help encourage pollinators into our no dig garden. But it's not just pollinators, it also helps to attract insects into the garden that will actually help in the fight against pests that attack your plants. They'll feed on things like black fly, green fly, and apart from anything else, they make the veg garden look really, really beautiful. And actually, it's the 1st of September today, but you can see we've been around deadheading a lot of these plants. And do that, because certainly here in our Zone 9A No Dig Norfolk Garden, we're not likely to see frosts here, certainly not until toward the end of November on average. And if you want to keep your displays going for as long as possible, because they do make you smile, they bring happiness to you, continue deadheading your annuals, and they'll keep producing the flowers for you. It's important to keep on top of any weeds at this time of year, because with the warm weather and the expected rainfall that we generally get during the autumn months, they can grow extremely quickly. The other thing, it's one of my favourites that I often talk to you about, is to take off any yellowing leaves. Any leaves that are no longer doing the plant any good. And the biggest reason for that is for slugs. Again, starting to come into the rainy season as we go into autumn. You can see that leaf really isn't doing any good for this plant. It's got plenty that are absolutely amazing, and they will ensure that the plant can photosynthesize as well as it can. Can see some sprouts starting to form in these sprout plants, Mrs. W.
I know, they're looking nice, aren't they?
That
Not
they
quite
are.
as tall as we thought they were going to be,
No,
but still we're going to get sprouts, that's the main thing.
we are. And of course, these plants won't be ready until late November, December. So they've still got plenty of time to actually shoot up a bit more.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, I would have expected the plants to be taller. Certainly the broody that we usually grow, they're normally up here, aren't they?
Yes, yeah. And we thought these were going to be bigger than those, but we were wrong. At this moment in time, we were wrong.
However, even at this height, we're approaching, as I say, the rainy season, the windy season. We often see a lot of storms here in the UK. But the windy weather will rock these plants, and you don't really want them to rock too much, because a lot of the little fine roots, they're the roots that take up a lot of the moisture and the nutrients that feed the plant. To get ahead, get a stake in the ground and just tie that to the plant, and that will stop that blowing around as the windier weather arrives through September and October. While you're in your brassica cages, do check for any eggs that may have been laid by the cabbage white, because they are about. Bit of slug damage, Mrs. W, but no eggs at the moment,
No, I
so
think,
that's good news.
I keep looking regularly in case. I did find a cabbage white under one of our cloches earlier in the week, and luckily I managed to get him out, but I've been looking in that cloche ever since in case he'd managed to, or she had managed to lay her eggs, but haven't seen anything else, so fingers crossed.
Good, but it is important that you do get under your nets every now and again and just check, because as well as you think you may have these protected, they're quite inventive little butterflies, and if they can find a way in, they will. It doesn't take their caterpillars very long to actually destroy a plant. Hello, Poppy. You can see here that the curry squash are doing really quite well, and we've limited this plant to 6 squash. This is going its usual lovely orangey red colour, but it's not ready to harvest yet. They will be during the month of September, but you can see there's still some green in the stem. If yours are struggling to ripen, then one of the best things you can do is to take away some of the leaves, so that the sun can actually get to these plants. And you can see these are now open to the elements, and they can get all the sun they need.
They're looking lovely, aren't they?
They are, and you can
Beautiful
really
colour.
see why they're called the onion squash, can't you?
Yeah, they are definitely an onion shape. Don't taste anything like onions.
Thankfully. Now, as and when you've had your harvests, do clear all of any of the debris. Again, as these start to die back, it's only going to encourage more pests. Sweet corn are great too once they're finished, because they're a tremendous source for the compost heap. And you can see in only the short time that we've been making this video, I already have a bucket full of material to be able to compost. during the month of September and October, you're going to get a lot of material that you'll be able to put onto the compost heap. So do make use of that. Start your composting off, even if it's not going to be ready until next year, if you don't have a hot composter like us, because that will all break down and make some lovely homemade compost that you can feed the soil life with as and when the beds become ready. I can see, just looking at the garden, that when the run of beans are finished, they will go to the compost heap. Every de-leafing that we've been doing, and indeed once we harvest the brassicas, all of the material that we don't use will just go back to feed Beauty and the beast. And then of course, hey Mrs. W, look down here. I think we're going to be having butternuts.
I know, they're looking lovely, aren't they?
Ooh.
Yes.
And
We haven't had a lot of success over the last couple of 3 years with butternut, have we? So that would be nice to have some of those.
no, I did say on another video, didn't I, that sometimes you have good years, sometimes you have not so good years.
Yeah.
It's looking like it's going to be a good year for us, Mrs. W.
Yeah, lovely.
But I digressed from that tip. I should be going through the rest of these and removing them. Once we've had a harvest of the butternut squash, that will all be removed. All of that will go onto the compost heap. But then you need to be preparing that bed for the upcoming growing season of 2025. Now, in this bed here, in our case, because everything harvests very, very late, what I should be doing is spreading some of our homemade compost over it. But another option you have is to actually sow some green manure. Soil is better if it's growing something. Bare soil equals weeds. So if you're not going to be growing a green manure or you're not going to be spreading compost onto your beds, then do make sure you keep on top of the weeding and keep them at bay. The greenhouse and the polytunnel really are doing very well. We're starting to get our first chilies, Mrs. W. Look, that's a turning colour
Oh, yes.
on this plant.
Yeah, that is, isn't it? Lovely.
Look at these super sauce. They're absolutely huge.
They're lovely, aren't they?
So do start harvesting your tomatoes. Don't leave them on the plants for too long. You don't want them to go over. And you want to encourage the others to ripen and not just put all their energies into these. There are many of them, Mrs. W.
There are. More pasta sauce, maybe?
I think so. More pasta sauce.
Or a passata. Might try passata with these ones.
Yeah, it is the ideal tomato to make passata with, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
While we're in the greenhouse, for the last 5 to 6 months we've been saying, ensure that you ventilate your greenhouse because it can get very, very hot in here. It's currently 28.5 degrees in here today. It does feel warm. During the summer months, of course, that's shot up to the late 30s.
Yeah, it has been, yeah.
So it's been really important to ensure that it's been ventilated. Now we have the opposite. We're caught in between now because daytime temperatures, as I said, are still warm. Almost 30 degrees. I'm sure it will tip over 30 degrees as we go into the afternoon. But do keep an eye on the nighttime temperatures. Keep an eye on your weather forecast. If it's going to get quite low, i.e. under 10 degrees Celsius, then you want to be doing the opposite, actually closing these vents up to retain the warmth and to keep these plants nice and cosy so that they ripen. This is the time to be pruning out this year's wood that provided fruits on your summer fruiting raspberries. Well, I get a lot of questions about this and people seem to get a bit confused. What you do need to do is to take out all of the wood that carried the fruits this year. You can usually tell because it's a very brown colour, whereas the new growth is lovely and lush. And then once you've done all that, you can then select the best canes that have shot up and tie them into the supports. Now, we do have a video on our channel on exactly how to do that. So do go and search that out, how to prune summer fruiting raspberries. I will leave a link in the description. You can see here that our carrots are truly looking quite amazing. There's going to be some lovely carrots there that we'll be able to use over the autumn and winter period. But what you will find is that as they become ready, they protrude out of the soil. It's probably been made worse by growing them in a raised bed because the soil is always going down. Even though we filled it right up to here, didn't we?
We did. You can see how that's...
So I'm just taking some of our homemade compost and I'm just covering the tops. Because what we don't want is too many green tops, which is exactly what will happen if we leave these uncovered. They also go a bit soft too, don't they, Mrs.
They
W?
can if the sun sort of gets onto them, can't they? Yes.
And we certainly don't want that. These are looking far too good to allow that to happen. And of course, there is much to harvest in the September garden. You'll probably see behind me we still have many autumn fruiting raspberries to enjoy. If you've been growing main crop potatoes, they will be starting to become ready to lift. The haulms are dying down and dying back, then just cut the tops off, leave them there for a couple of weeks so that the skins can harden up, and then take your harvest. Clearly, if you're growing a late main crop variety that won't be ready till October, then you'll just need to delay that step until the month of October. And we've still got some great stuff to come through the rest of the year. In fact, September's looking really exciting. Myself and Mrs. W are actually going to be attending the Malvern show, aren't we?
We are. Looking forward to that.
We're also right in the middle of producing our how-to videos, how to grow from seed to table. So if you want to be a part of that and you're not yet subscribed, then do so. And you'll be able to follow our journey in our new Dig Norfolk garden. Have a great gardening week, won't you all? And we shall see you on the next one.